Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really surprising story about Pakistan's economy. It's been stuck in this cycle of debt and crisis for, well, decades. But what if the answer wasn't another complicated bailout? What if it was something way simpler and a whole lot brighter?
Let's kick things off with a number, 24. What's so special about 24? Well, that is the record-breaking number of times Pakistan has had to go to the IMF for a bailout. A world record. Yep, even beating Argentina. And, this isn't just some crazy streak of bad luck. No, it's the result of what you could call a vicious cycle. It's this crippling loop where the country is so dependent on expensive, imported energy that it just drains all their money, which then kicks off these financial crises over and over again.
Okay, so let's really get into this. How does a country get so caught up in an energy trap like this one? Let's take a closer look.
All right, for as long as anyone can remember, Pakistan's whole economy has been powered by imported fossil fuels. I mean, just look at this. Oil and natural gas make up this huge chunk of their energy mix. And when you're that dependent, you're just completely at the mercy of whatever happens in the global markets.
And this didn't just happen overnight. It was more like a snowball rolling down a hill. See, back in 2007, their own domestic gas production peaked and then started to fall off. So what happened? They had to start importing more and more and more just to keep things running. And that left their entire economy totally exposed to these wild swings in global energy prices.
But then something really unexpected happened. Just in the last couple of years, a potential way out of this whole mess has just appeared, seemingly out of thin air. And honestly, the scale of what's happening is just mind-blowing.
So it really all boils down to one incredible number, 35 gigawatts. Now, to give you an idea, 1 gigawatt is a ton of power, enough to light up a whole city. And Pakistan, they imported 35 gigawatts worth of solar panels in just 2 years. It's a number that's almost hard to wrap your head around.
Okay, let's try to put that into perspective, because it's wild. In just 2 years, Pakistan brought in more solar power capacity than France has installed in its entire history. Think about that. And get this, it's also more solar than the entire continent of Africa imported from China during that same time. That's how massive this is.
So you're probably thinking, wow, what a massive government project, right? Well, here's the really interesting part. This whole revolution, it wasn't driven by some big government plan. Not at all. It happened from the bottom up. What happened was basically a perfect storm. It's a classic case of supply meeting demand at just the right time. So on one side, you've got this flood of super cheap solar panels hitting the global market. And on the other, you have millions of people who are just desperate for a better way to get electricity.
So let's look at the supply side. What was going on? Well, Chinese companies were just cranking out way more solar panels than they could possibly sell in their own country. This massive overproduction meant global prices just tanked. They dropped by 60% since 2022. All of a sudden, solar panels went from being expensive to being unbelievably cheap.
And then there's the demand side. The situation in Pakistan was, well, perfect for a solar boom. People were dealing with electricity prices that had shot up 155% in just 3 years. 155%! Plus, there were constant blackouts. So for literally everyone, from farmers who need reliable power for their crops to families in the city trying to escape crazy high bills, solar just made perfect sense. It was a no-brainer.
Now, the market was definitely the main engine here, but you could say the government helped pour gasoline on the fire. They did a couple of smart things. First, they didn't tax solar panel imports. And second, they had this really generous system called net metering, which is a fancy way of saying they'd pay you for any extra power your panels generated and sent back to the grid. It just created the absolute perfect conditions for this thing to explode.
Okay, so we have this massive, unexpected solar boom. What does this actually mean for Pakistan's economy? Could this really be the thing that finally breaks that vicious cycle we were talking about at the beginning?
Well, the potential is just enormous. This flood of solar panels could nearly double Pakistan's entire capacity to generate electricity. I mean, think about it. Before all this started, the whole country had about 46 gigawatts of capacity. And now they've just dropped another 35 gigawatts on top of that. It's a game changer. What this means is that solar power, which was basically non-existent in Pakistan before the pandemic, could soon make up more than half of the country's entire power generation capacity. And if that happens, it would slash their need for those expensive imported fuels. It would be hitting that vicious cycle right where it hurts.
So this brings us to the really big question. right? Can this bottom-up, market-driven explosion of solar actually fix a national economic problem that's been around for decades? The potential is definitely there, it's huge, but we just don't know for sure how it's all going to play out.
But whether it completely solves the problem or not, what's happened in Pakistan is a fascinating case study. It offers some really powerful lessons for the rest of the world, for any country that's trying to figure out this whole energy transition thing.
Lesson number 1, you don't always need some massive top-down government plan. Sometimes, when the tech gets cheap enough, the market will just take over. And in those cases, maybe the best thing a government can do is just step aside and let it happen.
And lesson number 2 is all about perspective. A lot of countries in the West look at China's massive industrial overproduction and see it as a threat. But what happened in Pakistan shows there's another side to that coin. For another country, it can be a golden opportunity, a chance to get incredibly cheap green technology that helps both your economy and the planet.
Which leaves us with one final, really interesting thought. Are we looking at a totally new way to go green? A model that isn't slow and bureaucratic and top-down, but is instead bottom-up, driven by the market, and happens at lightning speed. What's happened in Pakistan? Well, it kind of suggests the answer could be a resounding yes.